For years now, I've been investigating the biblical account of the Israelites crossing the wilderness during the Exodus to worship God at Mount Sinai. Would it be possible to still find evidence for that mountain today, after 3,500 years?
The experience on Mount Sinai and the Exodus are monumentally important events in Jewish tradition and history. God brought us out of Egypt with a mighty arm and a strong hand. This is repeated in the story as it is on every Passover by Jews today.
This is the very foundation of the biblical narrative. The Lord says, remember, remember, remember. Teach these things to your children. Do not forget, remember. Because this is some of the most amazing, awe-inspiring, foundational, miraculous acts of the Lord throughout the entire Scriptures. And so if we believe the entire Bible is true, it really hinges on whether or not the Exodus account is true.
But does finding the location of Mount Sinai really matter?
If Sinai didn't happen, our faith is in vain. It is grounded in a biblical location, and so our quest is very legitimately to find out where it was located.
Many people today declare that these biblical stories are just myths because there's no evidence. So why hasn't any evidence for the Exodus journey been recognized? Maybe it's because we've been looking for evidence in the wrong locations. But how might knowledge of Mount Sinai's location have been lost? One explanation goes back to the Roman conquest of Judea in AD 70 and again in 135, when the temple and the city of Jerusalem were destroyed. More than 1.5 million Jews were killed and the rest were banished from the Holy Land. The Jewish people lost many things at that time. Could knowledge of Mount Sinai's location have been forgotten as well?
It's assumed that when the temple was destroyed, that there were a lot of ancillary records, extra-biblical records, that were also lost. And perhaps those records carried more detail of the Exodus.
In my previous film, I set out to investigate 3 of the 6 most popular locations proposed for Mount Sinai. These first 3 sites were in the Sinai Peninsula, and their proponents take the Egyptian approach, which sees the Exodus on a small scale, including the sea crossing and Mount Sinai being near Egypt. I'm now set to explore the next 3 mountain candidates, the final near Egypt site called Har Karkum in the Negev of Israel, and then 2 sites using the Hebrew approach, which has a large-scale exodus leading to the mountain locations on the distant Arabian Peninsula, Jebel Alaz in the north and Halal el-Bedr farther south. But there is a challenge. Some of these candidates are in areas that have been off limits for anyone to conduct an archaeological investigation because of its potential connection to the Bible and the nation of Israel. When Moses fled, he went to Midian. Why haven't scholars looked in Midian in Saudi Arabia?
Because they can't. That's why.
One of the first interviews of my investigation was with archaeologist Jim Phillips.
There are sites in areas where people cannot work that may reflect on the Old Testament, and therefore we're going to lose them. And we're going to lose them in terms of the information because the political regimes of these particular states in the Near East will not allow research on the topic of the Old Testament.
Swedish DNA research scientist, the late Dr. Leonard Moller, was a long-time Exodus explorer and a dear friend of mine who favored the Hebrew approach. It was Moller who introduced me to the idea of looking for a pattern of evidence that matched the Bible, no matter where it might be found.
In science, when we don't understand things, we do experiments and then we look for what we call pattern recognition. With the data we have, does it form a pattern? Is it something we can interpret? And can we come to a correct conclusion? When you go into history and archaeology, you can apply this same method of pattern recognition, looking for specific patterns of evidence that match the descriptions of events mentioned in the Bible. It is important to question every premise because one false premise can easily lead to a false conclusion.
The Bible reveals its own roadmap for the journey taken by the Israelites. This roadmap highlights 5 main criteria for the Exodus route after the miraculous sea crossing. This is where you get to join me as a thinker in the investigation. You can use the Mount Sinai scorecard to grade the evidence for each mountain. The resulting pattern on your scorecard will show you what you think of each of the candidates. I'll be sharing my scorecard at the end of the film. Will any of these new candidates have a pattern of evidence that matches the steps of this biblical sequence? The first mountain is Har Karkum, which some pronounce as Har Karkom. In the 1950s, Italian archaeologist Emanuele Anati was one of the first surveyors of Israel's Negev desert. As a leading expert in ancient rock art, he was surprised by what he discovered.
I did not look for Mount Sinai. I didn't even think to put Mount Sinai in my research. I was looking for rock art, and they found this mountain, which was full of rock art, but has also shrines, cult sites of all sorts, standing pillars and so on.
After years of research, Anati published his findings in his book, The Mountain of God. It was this identification that inspired others to follow, including Deb Hearn, a housewife from Australia and mother of 4. A family vacation took her to Israel, where she met Dr. Tali Erickson-Guinea, who is the director of archaeology for the Negev region. Tali introduced Deb to Anati's proposal of Har Karkum as the real location for Mount Sinai. Traveling down the border of Israel and Egypt, my wife Jill and I joined Deb and Tali. The Israeli military escorted us due to the danger of snipers. From there, it was a long, brutal journey as we traveled deep into the barren landscape of the Negev desert. After several hours, we finally set up camp at the base of the mountain. It's pretty amazing being here at Har Karkum.
It really is.
You have worked together for
20
over
years.
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years.
Mm-hmm. What did that collaboration look like?
Debbie's working from far away and she's working on maps, and she said, oh, well, they just went up here and they went over this region. I'd say, no, they didn't. There's no way. This is something that's impassable. But if we go over here, we can see where there's an ancient road going in this direction. And that was what really convinced her.
After years of pursuing these questions, Deb decided to go back to school and eventually earned a PhD in biblical geography. Why do you think you were so interested in doing this?
Well, everyone would like to be sure that what they base their life on is a worthwhile and a sensible foundation. I had a crisis of faith like most people do in my mid-30s. I had another one in my mid-40s. And I think maybe it was the emotion of those crises which propelled me to decide whether what I was basing my life on was true, worthwhile, necessary. Look, if the stories of the Bible didn't happen to real people in real time, in real space, then I, for one, and I don't know if there's something wrong with me, but I, for one, don't know why I would bother. Why would you go to church every week? Why would you pray? Why would you look forward to the future if the whole foundation of what you are doing this for is a fiction?
The questions Deb was confronting are also being raised by millions of people around the world. Did the events of the Bible really happen? Does God reveal who He is throughout history? And if so, can I trust this God today? My own crisis of faith early in this investigation raised similar questions, and is what led to the development of the Patterns approach. As I consider Har-Carchom as a candidate for Mount Sinai, the first step of the investigation is the journey to the mountain. This journey went through a series of campsites and wildernesses between the miraculous sea crossing and Mount Sinai. Moses described the journey in the book of Exodus, but in Numbers chapter 33, he listed all the campsites.
After the miracle of the splitting of the sea, Moses and the people are now led into the desert where there is no food and there is no water, and the people are starting to complain and argue, and God has to show his power and his intention through continued miracles.
There are three wildernesses encountered on these travels: the wilderness of Shur, the wilderness of Sin, and the wilderness of Sinai at the mountain. Defining the wildernesses of the Exodus journey is key to Deb's proposal. She came all the way from Australia to my hometown of Minneapolis to explain the details.
It became apparent to me that the wildernesses were intimately connected with the progress of the site. And I thought, what are these wildernesses? You know, why is this site in that wilderness, but this site's in that wilderness? What's changed?
Yeah.
What's changed? The watershed. I got my cartographer to trace all the watersheds, which are the areas where water runs in this direction on that side of it and this direction on that side of it.
Yeah, so I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Which is a fantastic thing to work out, because then you know where the biblical wildernesses are. Their topography, their geography, everything. Each of these is a little ecosystem of its own, and therefore it deserves its own name.
I think the thing that's been very, I'll use the word clever,
Yep.
is that you've identified a way to make the wildernesses have meaning.
They totally have meaning when you know that they have borders and they have a hydrology and they have their own ecology.
Mm-hmm. That's a really big idea. She showed me a map of her proposed Exodus route that had dots for each of the places named in the journey in groups of 3. There are no camps marked in her wilderness of Sin.
This route has no water sources, no natural water sources. You have to dig for water in the wadis.
A wadi is a riverbed channel or ravine that's usually dry. Another important aspect of the journey is the total travel time it took the Israelites from Egypt to Mount Sinai, which was 45 to 60 days, depending on different interpretations of Exodus 19:1. Exodus explorer Ryan Morrow thinks this is a challenge for Har-Carchom.
Har-Carchom suffers from the same problem that all the other mountain candidates in the area of the Sinai Peninsula suffer from, which is that it's too close to where the Israelites would have departed. If you look on a map, you can see it's really not that far of a distance away.
I had a sequence of campsites, and it was my conviction that these were daily stations. So I was looking for water sources on ancient routes that were about a day apart.
Mm-hmm.
And look, that can vary. That can vary from 15 kilometres to 30 kilometres, but this is a pastoral group, so generally within 20 kilometres.
Even traveling at the moderate travel speed of 20 kilometers or 12 miles a day, the Israelites could have reached Har-Carchom in about 20 days, not the 45 to 60 days it actually took to reach Mount Sinai. To compensate for this, Deb proposes that the Israelite men were circumcised during the journey and stayed in one place, recovering for nearly a month. The next 2 steps to investigate for Har-Carchom are Midian and the backside of the wilderness.
Moses stayed in the land of Midian, where he spends 40 years living as a shepherd with the priest of Midian named Jethro.
During this 40-year stay in Midian, Moses first came to Mount Sinai.
The Bible relates that Moses led Jethro's flock into the back country of the wilderness in search of pasture. And at a burning bush on the slopes of Mount Sinai, the mountain of God, God spoke to Moses, telling him to bring the people of Israel back to this mountain to worship him after leading them out of bondage.
This concept of worship is very important to God. He declares that he is the only one to be worshiped. And why shouldn't he be? After all, He created everything that exists. And so the ancient prophecy to Abraham was fulfilled in the Exodus, to take his descendants out of bondage in Egypt and into freedom, to worship the one true God at Mount Sinai, the same mountain where Moses first met the Lord.